the other materials were different in degree or in character between the different sites. Now, and I'll quickly pass now to Nosharo. And here is an example of the wall. You can see it just there, and a drainage area coming through that wall at the site of Nosharo, which also, but again, as you see here, the wall is actually eroded. So in conclusion, I would like to emphasize again, you have these different parts of the area covered by the Indus civilization and its relatives. I'm going to just let them sit down. Take it. So I'm going to conclude my presentation today by, again, emphasizing that the different parts of the Harappan world were variable. They had a separate substrate beneath them, a cultural substrate below the Harappan veneer. But even so, in areas such as in the areas, for example, of northern Gujarat, in the Kutch area and adjoining areas of Kathiawar Peninsula, you have many sites which were walled in those areas, many smaller sites and bigger sites both. In the areas to the east, to the west, further north, the western portion of Sindh going into Baluchistan, you had sites which were walled along the Makran coast, and you had sites like Nosharo also which were walled. If you go further to the north, you have the site of Shortagai near the Amudarya. We don't really know if that was walled or not, but it probably was. And you also have sites in Haryana and Punjab, as well as in Cholistan and in Sindh, basically, which also were walled. So walling was a very characteristic feature of Indus Valley-related sites. And again, I emphasize the terminology and the different functions that these walls may have provided to the populations. Protection against floods, protection against raiders or invaders, although we don't have any really solid evidence for that, for delimitation and control. But basically, they were multifunctional features of these archaeological sites. And I'm going to make a very rash prediction, and that is all Harappan sites had perimeter walls. Now, whether this was for ideological reasons or for other reasons, I think it's a useful, and the reason I think it's a useful thing to say is because if I say this, maybe people will go out and try to prove that I'm wrong. And therefore, they might go looking for these city walls, and actually they might find them as well. So it's up to the archaeologists to prove otherwise, and when encountered, to define the history and the nature and to investigate the function of those walls to the degree that it is possible to do so. And also, finally, in the spirit of this particular conference and in the spirit of the workshops that we had, we also have to think about how we're going to deal with the protection of these walls and the possibility of rebuilding them, because if you rebuild something with new material, it's basically can be sacrificed and you can put another new material on it, but it'll actually give the visitor a much better understanding and view of what the site looked like originally when the people were living there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This has already been a rather long session, and therefore I know you folks out there don't want me to say very much. I've been in your position too. Those of you who suffered through my talk on the first day know that I'm a skeletal biologist, and I tend to think of things both mathematically and symbolically. I couldn't help but be struck by some common themes that resonate throughout all three papers, especially the first and the third paper. In the issue at hand is the issue of between versus within group variance. That is, how much of a homogenizing influence is exerted by the Harappan core on the periphery. And this relates directly to the work of Dr. Sindh in his work in the Hakra Valley. I certainly am interested in the DNA. However, I will also say that despite the categorization of DNA of tens of thousands of people from the Indian subcontinent, from thousands of ethnic groups, the results have been more confusion rather than resolution. So, how did it all begin? That is the Harappan period in the Hakra Valley. What is unique about the Harappan expression in the Hakra River Valley? And how tightly was the development of the Harappan experience in this area coordinated with the core area in the Indus Valley? I think those are the three very important questions. I find it rather intriguing to track the origins of the Harappan to 6270 to 6070 BC, because if I'm not mistaken, that puts it back to Mehrgar. What I think might be an interesting way to look at differential dynamics of the flow of cultural information is to think of Edward Sapire's linguistic area concept. Sapir argued that the greatest differentiation in languages would be in the core area where those languages originated, and as those languages spread, they would smear and become increasingly diffuse. There we might be able to find the integration of the local Hakka tradition and the traditional core tradition of the Indus Valley showing up in decorative motifs. And we might ask, what are the syncretisms? After all, the people in this local area are not just going to blindly accept the decorative motifs and vessel forms from outside, but they'll work them into the ideological system that is the tradition of their parents and their grandparents. What are the processes of urbanization, and what role with ethnicity? And this echoes to both Dr. Wright's and to Dr. Meadows' paper. We know that there was some kind of fundamental diversity. It's evident from the archaeological record that predates the coalescence of the Harappan tradition. This means then that during this urbanization process, these forces of ethnicity had to somehow be incorporated into a larger corporate whole. The reactions are integration, in which we get an amelioration of ethnic identification, intensification, in which jamming people together in urban settings of different ethnic backgrounds makes them express those ethnicities to a greater degree, and stabilization. When I was listening to Dr. Wright's presentation on Mohen Jo Daro waterworks and sanitation, I was struck by the fact that we're talking about 5 aspects. We're talking about the introduction of potable water, the distribution of that water, the collection of gray water, its disposal, and continued maintenance. Each one of these represents a bottleneck of control. We've probably all read Wittvogel's Oriental Despotism, in which control of a vital and volatile resource such as water can grant specific segments of society great power over others. How do we identify such power? By looking at the archaeological remains in such an urban metropolis as Mohen Jo Daro. What is the density of waterworks across the site? What is the differential elaboration of waterworks within households? What kinds of iconography do we find in those ceramic vessels that are found in the streets to collect that water? So we must ask, what is the relative agency? Is it the civic authority? Is it the community as a cooperative? and what role is played by the individual as manifested by a familial kin group? These are very poignant questions. Finally, to turn to Dr. Meadows' work, I was very happy to see him raise again this issue of pre-Harappan diversity and then this thin veneer of metropolitan cosmopolitanism. Once again, we ask ourselves, what is the meaning of these perimeter walls? Especially, do they define within group versus between group identity? Let us consider. At a small site such as Rojdi, that perimeter wall contains the entire community, a unifying whole, saying, we are of this community. But what of Harappa, where you have a division of a metropolis into specific wards? Does this then build into it conflicting polities, each vying for power? These are questions that are worthy of discussion. Finally, he mentioned that we find that Harappa exhibits its greatest expansion, perhaps at a surprising time, from 2200 to 1900 BC, a period in which it seems that there was an ecological crisis and aridification. Could this not be a period in which there was increased nucleation of settlement as an adaptive strategy to these new challenging conditions? Thank you very much.
With those enlightening remarks by Professor Dr. Brian Hemphill, we conclude this session, and we would be immediately moving into the concluding session because we are going over time. And so I will kindly request you to give a big hand to our participants of this session. Sayyid Sardar Ali Shah. For the concluding session, I would request the participants of the concluding session to take their places on the stage. I would request Honorable Nisar Khoro Saab to please take his seat on the stage. The Honorable Sayyid Sardar Ali Shah, Minister for Culture, to please take his seat on the stage. Dr. Kalimullah Lashari, once again, to please take his seat. And Dr. Richard Meadow to please take his seat. Ji, please. Ji, please.
Dr. Khurshid Junojo Saab, मुझे कल का वाटी रुको डॉक्टर था नजर अचन साहब खुर्शीद जुनोजो साहब के गुजारिश है तो स्टेज पे अचन डॉक्टर मोहम्मद अली भुट्टो साहब के गुजारिश है तो I can't see Dr. Mark Kenire here. I saw him somewhere just now. Can somebody call him Dr. Mark Kenire from outside? He is also requested to sit on the chair, and Dr. Jensen also. Thank you very much.
So as part of this concluding session, I would now request Dr. Richard Meadow from Harvard University to please give the summation remarks for this conference. Dr. Richard Meadow.
Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be able to present to you a statement on which basically is a summation of the conference. The 2017 conference on Mohen Jo Daro was the first major conference since 1973 to be held on the campus of the Mohen Jo Daro archaeological site. And the conference that we have been privileged to attend over these last 2 or 3 days was sponsored by the National Fund for Mohen Jo Daro and by the Department of Culture, Tourism and Antiquities, Government of Sindh. Much appreciation, I think, is due to these organizations for the enormous amount of work which it took to create such a successful conference. And opportunity for people from outside of Pakistan and also for people within Pakistan to get to know each other and to discuss archaeological matters, and particularly to discuss matters related to the great site of Mohen Jo Daro. The deliberations carried out over the 3 days focused on 2 objectives. These were, first, to present archaeological and related research being carried out by scholars from different countries around the world, including Pakistan, that are concerned with the Indus civilization and its antecedents, as well as with the site of Mohen Jo Daro itself. Second, to discuss and evaluate efforts, past and present, to preserve the World Heritage Archaeological Site of Mohen Jo Daro, and to determine how to ensure the preservation of the site in the future, while at the same time continuing to present it to the public in an engaging yet accurate fashion. Many research presentations were made by the 16 scholars from the following countries: Pakistan, USA, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, India, and Japan. A wide variety of topics were covered by the speakers, and these are available to you in the program of the conference, along with the abstracts which go with those papers. I think that we have seen, however, a very great diversity of perspectives, points of view, beliefs, and a lot of very interesting new data, and a lot of reworking in very thoughtful ways of older data. And I think all of this has been extremely helpful for those of us who are specialists in this field to be able to have the opportunity at the site of Mohen Jo Daro itself to have this wonderful experience. Perhaps some of the most important sessions were the 2 technical and 1 plenary session, which were held to discuss issues pertaining to the preservation of the site of Mohen Jo Daro, and to discuss issues pertaining to the studies and research on the Indus civilization and possible means to further those efforts. And third, midterm plans for the site preservation and promotion of tourism and related issues. Relating particularly to midterm plans for Mohen Jo Daro and also for other parts of Pakistan, the following objectives were discussed and recommendations made. First, the essential need to continue coating with clay the baked bricks at Mohen Jo Daro. This technique of leaching out the mineral salts and protecting baked brick has proved to be very effective in preventing structures from disintegrating. In other words, to create a sacrificial outside layer which can then be replaced on a regular basis and save what's inside. Second, the UNESCO ICOMOS, in other words, the International Committee of Monuments and Sites, Save Mohen Jo Daro campaign should be reactivated with a tighter focus. And the International Committee of Archaeological Heritage Management should be consulted in relation to developing an appropriate plan to deal with the preservation and study of Mohen Jo Daro based on what has been learned over the past 50+ years. Moving outside of Mohen Jo Daro proper, third, efforts must be made to protect archaeological sites throughout Pakistan, but particularly in Baluchistan, which are being heavily pilfered or threatened by pilfering today. Responsible parties should be directed to enforce existing antiquities regulations in relationship to that pilfering of archaeological sites. Fourth, archaeological sites should be located, surveyed, and listed to ensure their protection. In other words, already efforts are being made, but much greater efforts should be expended to try to document as many as possible of archaeological sites within the different provinces of Pakistan. This will probably fall to the individual provinces, and I hope that they will take up the effort to do this. Fifth, there should be coordination between the provinces of Pakistan in relationship to archaeology and heritage management. There's not much use in basically reinventing the wheel in every province, and hopefully it would be possible to get relevant people from each province together on a regular basis so they could discuss matters like those which I mentioned previously, and come to some understanding among each other, and also to help each other out in areas where they may not be as expert as people from another province may be, and vice versa. So I think this sort of approach would also be very helpful, and this is what the recommendations include of the work of the workshops which dealt with the issues pertaining to archaeology in Pakistan. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I will turn the table over to the moderator again.
I would now like to invite Dr. Kalimullah Lashari, the keynote speaker for this conference, to give the concluding remarks to this excellent conference. Thank you.
This conference will go down in history as we remember the conference of 1973. And I'm sure that the efforts of people of Pakistan towards saving the iconic site of Mohen Jo Daro will be getting a real help out of the recommendations coming from this conference. Let me first point out the trust gap which exists between us and as state partners and the UNESCO. We do understand that in the past several years we have been neglecting our responsibility towards Mohen Jo Daro and other such sites which are within Pakistan and especially within Sindh. This trust gap has led us into the situation where we are about to be removed from the World Heritage Site list. The threat is looming over Makli, and the threat is looming over Mohen Jo Daro. Now, being in such a situation, there's need that we should wake up. The wake-up call should have come earlier. But thank God that the National Fund for Mohen Jo Daro here and the Department of Culture, Tourism and Antiquities has rose to the occasion. And this is going to be testified by the very act which this conference in itself present. And looking at the recommendations and already the mutual interaction among us, the world scholars at large, and with the UNESCO representative here, we have begun a phase of trust building. I am going to undertake extensive dealings with the UNESCO. Michael Johnson is also getting involved because he is the representative of UNESCO, and also he is with us on technical consultative committee. So we have started already making waves, and this is going to be, I know that it is a long way, but I do have the belief and faith that the persistence from the state partner like Pakistan and Sindh will reassure the world body to keep us on the coveted list. We here had 3 wonderful technical sessions, and they have pointed out to various remarkable insights into the crux of the problem. We do understand that there is multifarious, a holistic approach required here to address such problems. And this is the reason that the scientific committee which has been handed over the recommendations, by these technical sessions is going to firm up their further recommendations for NFM and for the Sindh government to act upon. This brings us to more understanding that here we are not only facing the problem of site management, it is just one aspect. We have to actually be focusing on various things, and for which I do understand that we have to keep up the management arrangements of the site, but for that we must have our midterm plans, and then we should go for long-term plans. This is the reason that I have requested the scientific committee not to step down once they have worked over the recommendations of the technical sessions, but they should continue work and provide us with the midterm plan and also the long-term plan. We do know that the initial efforts where UNESCO and government of Pakistan had joined hands and they worked for it, and that is again a lesson from the history that at that time, due to the immensity of the problems, there was an authority created. So it was the time's need that there was a dedicated body also. Despite the fact that there was the department existing, but the need was felt to address those current issues and go ahead in the future. We had here authority for preservation of Mohen Jo Daro. But unfortunately, the authority was created for a period, and once this period was over, the authority was disbanded. And once the authority was disbanded, the remaining departments' responsibilities rose, but the capacity building within the department was not there. So the work suffered, the management suffered, the ruins suffered, Mohen Jo Daro suffered. And we as a people of Pakistan, state partners with UNESCO, we were being mistrusted by the world body. Now, this is the time that we have to rise up to this occasion. We have to address this issue. There's no time to lose. And this is the reason that we have to work on war footings. And this scientific committee is going to help us, the department and the government and the NFM. This conference has already revived its last connections. We have been there in the scholarly world, visiting all around globally, presenting the situation of the research work in Pakistan and Pakistani heritage. But we were not able to associate more closely with all those centers and institutions which are working on South Asia. So this was the time that we reached out and have been able to bring our associates in research, comrades in academic pursuits. So we are building up more stronger links and stepping up the quantification of the research and academic activities. For this purpose, we are of the considered opinion that our universities should be empowered. Those should be given more roles to play. The university archaeology department, without sufficient funding and the assistance from the seniors, cannot possibly have the annual field programs. Without annual field programs, the students won't be actually acquiring the required training and education. So there is need that we should emphasize on empowering the university departments, because this is the nursery from where we get the support. This is the model which will give us the human resource available for the work on our heritage sites. So this is very lifeline. So we have to, and I am going to undertake my consultations and programs with the HEC here in Sindh and also HEC in Islamabad.